good afternoon everybody. First thing I'd like to say, I begin to feel like a researcher here. After teaching, this is when I begin to feel like a researcher with you guys, sharing these ideas, this idea of sharing practices, being in a community of practice and forming networks for me is absolutely essential. So that's my first point. My second point is I'm going to say that I came to research late in my teaching career. And I think this is why I've got a strong affinity with longitudinal qualitative research. If people mention quantitative research and I begin to see statistics in papers, I begin to get like the cross out and put garlic around my neck, you know. I don't particularly like it. I try to learn about it. This is one of the tensions that I have, is that sometimes I don't understand quantitative research, and I find it difficult sometimes to see the relevance of quantitative research to teacher education. So that's one of the tensions I mention. Generally speaking, what I've tried to do in my post, I've got tensions on one side, constraints on the other, but opportunities that arise from both of these. It's like a dialectic, and I think that basically, and I don't mean tensions in a negative sense, I mean tensions that we're confronted with and we discuss different ideas that may lead to cognitive dissonance, or anxiety or particular discomfort with certain things that we're faced with. If I can just say one thing about my own experience, is that I started learning Portuguese seriously when I did a master's course in Portugal. And there I was confronted with Portuguese in every single lesson, not as a Portuguese as a foreign language, but for Portuguese being taught on a master's course. And there I experienced language anxiety, and I thought, wow, do my students feel like this at times when they're speaking in a foreign language? So this basically gave a big impulse, like this word today, for doing research. And I began to research with my students. First of all, interviews with future teachers of English outside the classroom, then inside the classroom in their actual classes, then on their actual practicum, which I thought would be the most pressurised situation. So this was my impulse for doing research. And then I began to think about things like self-disclosure. In other words, I was really inspired by introduction in Anita Pavlenko's book on emotions and multilingualism, where she says, is it permissible to connect our own experiences with our research? And I gradually began to think, yes, it is. And when I started, first of all, to look at the instruments that had been used to investigate language anxiety, I thought, yes, great. It was a discovery, a methodological apparatus that had been tested and validated. And I thought, I will try it. And I did apply it, and I was happy with the results. But I thought, what do these numbers really mean? And I thought more about, this should be investigated from the point of view of the learners themselves, their words, using a variety of methodological implements. Basic sort of like conclusions, really, that I've come to. Because I've trodden a lonely path really in Portugal. I'm really the only researcher who's done language anxiety, surprisingly, in the Portuguese context. So I've had to go out of department, institutional and national boundaries to find people who are interested. Hence my, my happiness in being in places like this, because I've met people who do have common interests. What would I say about research in general? Important to feel more competent and confident about being a researcher. Agency, I think, is absolutely essential. At some point, we have to decide we have to do this. Okay, we have to go ahead and meet with other people in the same areas. Pondering possible quantitative research projects or mixed research projects as well. If anybody's interested in talking further, obviously I'm here to talk about those things. Thank you.